Is Josh Hoover playing like a top quarterback in the Big 12? We'll discuss that next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also find us on your favorite podcast platform. I feel like when you watch somebody closely on a weekly basis, and I know people listening to this podcast, watching this podcast like me, you're obsessive about TCU. You love the Frogs. And so you watch your team every week and you kind of lose perspective sometimes. I know I can be guilty of this, where you're like, man, this person's really struggling. But then you kind of zoom out and look at it and you think, maybe they're not as bad as I thought. Now, there are some legitimate problems on this TCU team. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to sugarcoat everything. I've covered them a lot over the year, but I'm always curious about the quarterback position because I think it's a lightning rod spot. People have all kinds of opinions about it. Josh Hoover took this job a year and a half ago now, and he wasn't expected to be the guy. I've been on record saying I did multiple podcasts a couple off seasons ago where I was like, TCU's got to bring in a QB. They need to bring in a quarterback because you can't have Chandler Morris, who at that time in his career had a history of being injured. You can't have him as the guy and then have a really young QB behind him in Josh Hoover. And so they did eventually bring in someone. It was Chance Nolan. And I think he was on campus for all of like a week before he checked out and said, you know, I'm going to retire from football. He had dealt with some neck injuries. And I don't know if it was that. I don't know if he got to fall camp and looked at the situation and said, I don't have a chance to be a starter here. I'm not interested in holding the clipboard for a year. Whatever. He moves on. And Josh became the backup and eventually took over and had a very rocky 2023. I think he's had some rocky moments this year, but overall, I feel like especially in the last few weeks, once he's cut out the turnovers, he's played at a high level. And I wanted to look at the numbers among Big 12 quarterbacks. He's got a 67% completion percentage, which is good for second in the conference among what I would say qualifying QBs. And I don't have an exact science for that, but I just kind of looked at the list and said, okay, these are the starters in the Big 12, right? He's thrown 22 touchdowns, 8 picks, which the 8 interceptions, that's a higher number than you probably want. But if he can protect the ball the next couple of weeks, he's got a chance to have 8 or 9 picks over 12 games. It doesn't look as bad. I think the problem was they came in bunches. He had multiple turnovers against Kansas. The ones against Houston cost them the ball game in some ways. Defense didn't play well either, but those turnovers aided that Houston offense and really sunk TCU. Shadur Sanders is an outstanding quarterback. He might end up being the number 1 pick in next year's draft. He's having a really good season. Josh has thrown for more yards than him. Shadur has a higher completion percentage. Shadur has more touchdowns and has 1 less interception. He's also been sacked 31 times. Josh has been sacked 11. I think those two are a good comparison. I'm not saying that Josh Hoover is Shadur Sanders. I think Shadur Sanders is the best quarterback in the Big 12. I don't really feel like there's a debate there. But some of the other guys that people have put ahead of Josh so far this season, a player like Rocco Becht at Iowa State, Baron Morton at Tech, Brendan Sorsby at Cincinnati, they're not dealing with the same circumstances that Josh is. All those QBs have a running game. Now, Shadur doesn't. The offensive line at Colorado is struggling. He's got great skill players, but I would say so does Josh Hoover. And they both put up really good numbers. I think Shadur is obviously the better quarterback, and he's going to probably prove that in the NFL. But as far as college QBs go, I think Josh is doing an outstanding job. Greg Thompson, who listens to the show a lot, I love him. He emailed me, I think it was during the Tech game, actually, from his seats, because he's a loyal season ticket holder, loyal fan. And he was like, dude, you said you love Josh Hoover. I don't understand. This was probably after his second interception that day where he was trying to hit, I think it was Jeremy Payne on the wheel route and threw the ball into harm's way and it got picked off. I don't get it. But he turned things around that afternoon. And since then, he's played well. I think the criticism against him would be two things. One, he's played really well against bad defenses this year. His best games have been against teams that have struggled. He's not a super mobile guy. I feel like there are times where he could tuck the ball and run, and he just doesn't do it. He's not really comfortable in the zone read game, which is a big part of what TCU has done in the past and a big part of Kendall Brow's offense. But they've adapted, and they've been able to put an offense on the field that's productive. The other thing is, I think he's played well in some big moments. There haven't been like signature drives late in games where he's taken them down in the last seconds to kick the field goal. They tried to do that against UCF, just didn't get enough yardage. They forced Limmerman into, I think, a 58-yarder, which he had the distance, but he pushed it right. Last year, had a few opportunities against like Texas Tech where he threw a pick. Of course, they beat Tech this year, and those were big drives they led the team on. It wasn't like end of the game, go score. Against Stanford this year, it was fourth quarter. Suddenly you're behind. All right, go down and score efficiently. The thing I like about him, all the intangible stuff is good. I feel like he's got good arm talent, good to great arm talent. And I believe he understands his offense well, and he's operating at a high level. And next season, if he makes another jump, then he should be in for another great year. The numbers, again, 3,233 yards, 22 touchdowns, 8 picks. Been sacked 11 times. Quarterback rating of 154.5. And you might say, Steven, it's because he throws the ball all the time. In this easy air raid system, that's why he is putting up all these numbers. Anybody could do that. Well, his attempts are not like he's thrown 378 times. Shadur Sanders has thrown 384. Rocco Becht has thrown for 312 times. Baron Morton's thrown 372 times. Noah Fafita has thrown 357 times. Jake Retzlaff at BYU, he's thrown 290 times. But, I mean, BYU is a really good team that's kind of operating their team in a different way. The QBs that Shehan Jayaraja from CBS Sports put ahead of Josh in his Big 12 quarterback list, and this was back in the end of October. Shadur Sanders, Rocco Becht, Jake Retzlaff, Avery Johnson, Sawyer Robertson, Brendan Sorsby. I mean, some of those guys, yeah, I think Shadur, you got to put him ahead of Josh. I think Jake at BYU, it's tough because they play very different styles, but just the sheer wins that he's put up this year, you put him ahead of Josh. But Rocco Becht, I mean, he's kind of hit a wall here in the second half of the season. Avery Johnson, I mean, it's sort of been up and down. Sawyer Robertson's played really well over the past 6 weeks. It's hard to argue with that too, but he doesn't have a full body of work necessarily like Josh has for the entire season. I'm just saying, sometimes you got to take a step back and look at things and go, you know what? Maybe this guy has something that we're missing. And I would also say, I believe he's still early in his career. And as a passer, I'm just talking strictly as a passer. I understand the QBs that I'm comparing him to are like Mount Rushmore type quarterbacks in the pantheon of TCU history. I'm making a specific comparison to this thing. I think as a passer, where he is in his career, he's ahead of where Max was in his career at this time. I think you could argue he's ahead of where Trayvon Boykin was. Now, both those guys were sort of in different situations because both Boykin and Duggan finally got offensive coordinators later in their career that did things that fit their talents. They also had the ability to be a dual threat and had great athleticism, and that took them to another stratosphere that I'm not sure Josh can quite reach just because he's not that type of quarterback. But just as a pure passer, he can sling the ball around, and I think he makes good decisions too. And yes, the turnovers are a problem, but I feel like he's reined that in over the last few weeks, and if he can finish strong, 8 to 9 picks over 12 games, I mean, sure, you'd love it to be 4, but there's not a lot of dudes that are doing that. And that's while he's being asked to throw the ball a lot. I mean, 8 interceptions and 372 attempts. When you break it down like that, it's a little bit different. I understand, though, those picks were in inopportune times. And if you don't think he's that type of dude, I would love for you to tell me why. I mean, I'm not pushing back against you or chastising you. I just mean, if you don't think he's that type of talent, you don't think he's that type of player, you don't feel like TCU can really reach like conference championship level heights with him at quarterback, then let me know here in the YouTube comments or tweet at me at SomeCockSteven. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can DM me there too. But to me, this feels like this is probably not a great example, but I'm going to use it anyway. Fellas, have you ever been in a, well, actually, I'm not going to do that. But I just mean this. I mean, sometimes you got to take a step back and look at something and think to yourself, okay, maybe I'm being a little too critical because I'm too close to the situation. I'm not saying there's not flaws here. There's not some things he has to work on in the offseason. I just think for year 2, a quarterback that is working through a brand new system to a certain extent, new to him, like it was new to him starting last year. I think there's a lot of good, positive things that have come from this season. And TCU seemed to make the decision last offseason, instead of kind of starting over from scratch at the quarterback spot, we're going to find a way to try to build around this guy. And you can continue doing that this offseason. You need to improve the running game. You need to improve and solidify your defense. Those are obtainable goals. Those are things that you can do and that you can attempt to fix so that you're more prepared to have an offense and a team that plays complementary football and can win with him at quarterback. So let me know your thoughts. We got a game tomorrow, 2 p.m., TCU, Arizona. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team. We do it here every day. Shout out to our friends at PrizePicks. Download the app today. You can use Locked On College as a promo code and get $50 instantly when you place one $5 bet. One $5 bet gets you $50 instantly on PrizePicks. It's not betting on games. It's betting on over-under on stat totals. So if you think Jamar Chase is going to have more than 79.5 receiving yards, you can go over-under that. If you think Patrick Mahomes is going to have more than 1.5 passing TDs, which, man, that feels like a pretty good, solid wager on both of those things. Jamar Chase has been going off lately. Pat Mahomes, obviously, really good quarterback. That's my expert opinion. Travis Kelce, do you think he'll get more than 59.5 receiving yards? Do you feel like Saquon Barkley goes for 79.5 rushing yards? Over, under. You can wager on all those things. Again, download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, TCU, Arizona. Kickoff at 2 p.m. on ESPN+. We will have a post-game show. We'll try to go live probably around 6 o'clock, 6:30, discuss what happened if the team notched another victory or if they fell back and lost after that win against Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State was and is bad. But I was super impressed with the way that they played in general. I thought it was their most complete game of the year. Defensively, they had a really good half. And I think the defense is just at a place where they're probably not going to play a dominant game. I think they did against Utah, but circumstances there being that Utah was missing Cam Rising, and they went back to Isaac Wilson. They hit one big play, and that was really it. TCU won that game 13-7. Of course, Long Island, like that was its own thing. They've had some dominant halves. Like they played a really good half against Stanford in the second half of that ball game. Against Kansas, had a good second half to that game. Against Oklahoma State, not shut them out, but held them in check for the most part in the first half of that game. And then Polk started, churning out some yards and scoring in the second half and made it a little more interesting. But the cool thing was every time the defense gave up scores, here comes the TCU offense responding. They responded with 2 drives in the third quarter, and that really salted the game away and left no doubt they were going to come away with the victory. So another opportunity to do that here against an Arizona team that is struggling this year. And it's senior day. And I think this class, which is kind of wide-ranging, is very interesting. I mean, one thing about it, too, is, in the past, you could really look at a senior class and be like, all right, over 4 years, these guys have all played together. This is what they've done. You've got some, with the transfer portal, you've got different, landmarks. So there are still some guys on this team that were a big part of that 2022 team. Savion Williams, Johnny Hodges, Bud Clark, and guys that made huge plays in that incredible run. And then they've also been part of this kind of downturn, and hopefully towards the end of this season, a turnaround in the right direction again. I'm hopeful that the legacy of this class, just in general, is that they built the foundation for what became a really salty program and consistent program moving forward. You didn't see the consistent results all the time during their tenure, but dudes like Jack Besh kind of took the torch and ran with it and started building the culture. Guys like Johnny Hodges, Bud Clark, Savion Williams, J.P. Richardson the last couple of years, they all came together to lay the foundation for what ends up becoming a really good program under Sonny Dykes. And honestly, it's a very different vibe than it would have been, weeks ago when I thought this senior class might be the group that was kind of ushering this coaching staff out. But they've done what they can to get this moving in the right direction again. If you want my keys to the game, you can listen to yesterday's episode. But briefly, you got to put pressure on Noah Fafita. I think that's the biggest thing in limiting this passing game. Teratua McMillan is a great wide receiver, and I feel like he's going to get his opportunities tomorrow. He's going to get his yards, make plays. Can you limit the other guys around him? Can you find ways to not allow, other players to make plays so that you can focus your resources and a lot of your schematic ability into, okay, how can we stop McMillan? How can we slow down Fafita? And I think so much of that just comes back to the bottom line of, are you able to get pressure? Are you able to get pressure and make Fafita uncomfortable and not allow him to go make plays? So that'll be, one big key on the defense side of the ball, because McMillan's had outstanding games this year. He's had games where he's just went off and taken over. You don't want that to happen, but he's going to get opportunities. He's going to get yardage. It's about trying to keep, I think, the rest of the team from having an uncharacteristic day. That could really hurt you. Offensively, running the ball, and, it can be in the traditional way. It can be in the Wildcat formation with Savion Williams. I would love to see some more momentum being built there. And it would be cool if we saw a running back kind of emerge. Tanner McKinney talked a lot about the running back position this year. We've had a back and forth about it. One thing that's been frustrating about it is it's just like somebody will have a good game and that's really it. There's just no consistency. So whether it's Cam Cook, whether it's Payne, whether it's Battle, if somebody over the last 2 weeks could sort of emerge, I think that would be big for this team, because it would at least give you an idea of, okay, these are the guys that we can sort of build around moving forward. And, as much as I love what they've kind of done with Savion here late in the season, I keep coming back to the fact that you can't replicate that next year, because he'll be in the NFL. So you got to find a way to get some of these young guys more involved. And then, finally, this coaching staff, you've had some extra time to prepare. Earn that check. Show some different things. I hope they're ready for what Arizona's going to throw at them. It's an Arizona team that should come in confident. They just got probably their biggest win of the season, not because of the opponent, but just because it felt like their backs were against the wall and they handled Houston, which is a team that's given people fits, namely TCU this year. So Frogs have a chance to get 2 wins in a row when they take on Arizona at home before that game at Cincinnati to wrap up the regular season. I can't believe we're almost at the end of the regular season. We'll come back and get some of your thoughts here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Shout out to ZBiotics. If you're in your 30s, in your 40s, you probably realized you can't do all the things that you used to. And one of those things might be, you know what, you can't go out at night and slam a bunch of drinks and have all the fun with your friends and wake up the next morning and have the energy to do what you need to the next day. Those next day activities, you need to do them without worry. So why don't you try ZBiotics? They have a pre-alcohol drink. For best results, make that your first drink of the night. Then drink responsibly, pace yourself, hydrate, make sure you get a good night's sleep, and then enjoy the next day. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Go to ZBiotics.com/LockedOnCollege to learn more. Again, that's ZBiotics.com/LockedOnCollege. You can get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On College at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee. If you're unsatisfied, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to ZBiotics.com/LockedOnCollege. Use that code LockedOnCollege at checkout for 15% off. Also want to give a plug to our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel is where the game starts. You can download the app or go to FanDuel.com. One $5 bet. You win that bet, you get $150 in bonus bets. FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. They make it simple for you. FanDuel, NFL, college basketball, college football. It's all available to you at FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. FanDuel, give it a try today. I just want to take a quick second, and then I'll get to some TCU Women's Hoop stuff, and I'll talk about some of your thoughts. I really appreciate you guys. I've tried to make more of a commitment this football season to putting out content every single day. You know, game weeks, we're doing it 6 days a week. I love that you listen and watch and interact with me. It gives me the, motivation and the accountability to be like, all right, I got to keep pumping this stuff out because people are tuned into it. And I realize I'm not like, the biggest podcaster in the world. I appreciate the core group of folks that rocks with me, or if you're just once a week or once every now and then, or you listen to it one time and you're like, this dude sucks or his technical abilities aren't great, so I don't want to listen again, that's fine too. But I appreciate everyone who tunes into Locked On Horned Frogs, whether via the audio or video variety. TCU Women's Basketball, they had a game yesterday afternoon. It was a field trip day game. Brought in some local Fort Worth students. Great crowd. Kids love to yell, man. I know. I got 4 of them at the house. They yell all the time. Frogs won 81-43. Sedona Prince had 16 points, 6 of 7 from the field. She's been so efficient so far this year. Haley Van Lith, not the best day shooting, 5 of 14, but 19 points overall and had 6 assists, continues to be a playmaker. One player that really impressed me, and it was honestly a stretch late in the first quarter when that game was still close. Donovan Hunter, she stepped in. She plays great defense, super active, had a couple steals, hit a big 3, had a layup after a deflection, had another steal where she took it coast to coast. And I think the big thing about Mark Campbell and the way he's constructed this roster, yes, you have stars. Like you have Sedona, you have Haley Van Lith. Madison Connor was a great player for them last year, but he's also put together really good role players. Maddie Shear still isn't back from injury. Hopefully she gets back soon. He's put together a roster that is cohesive and that makes sense. And that's tough to do in the era of the transfer portal, to get like a full roster like that and have that turnover and have them playing with continuity. And it seems like they've done that well so far. All right. Keys to the game against Arizona. That was the episode yesterday. I also talked about like what the future of TCU's kind of program is, where they're at. Tommy Fisher said TCU should be expecting to play for conference championships year in and year out. We have the resources, the talent. There are no blue bloods in the conference, and TCU has proven they can recruit better than anyone else. If current coaching staff doesn't get it done on a consistent basis, we'll move on. There are no world beaters in their conference. They have every advantage. They need to be the next program to kind of do what OU did year in and year out. And he went on to say some other very eloquent things. Yeah, I agree with most of that. I don't know if there will ever be another Oklahoma. I hope it is. I hope it's TCU. But that was a truly dominant run. And it was a combination of great recruiting, but also a coaching staff that is great at in-game adjustments and schematics and all those things. But I definitely think TCU should be in the mix year in and year out. They technically still are, but we know it's a long shot right now. And yeah, I think next season, frankly, if they're not, then they probably will move on, because I don't feel like you can just sit in the world of 6 to 8 wins each and every year. But they got to get more consistent. I mean, that's proven. CJ says the offense can be elite in the pistol. Defense can't key on one side. No line inadequacies can be overcome by backs with a head of steam. Might hurt pass pro, but line is much better there in run blocking. Yeah, CJ's been on the, hey, pistol formation. This is what we need to do for a while now. And it was a good point when he brought it up after the Oklahoma State game. And I'm not sure why they're not more comfortable using it more frequently. It could be, as you said, pass protection issues out of that particular formation. But, yeah, they do seem to have some ability to get the running game going there as well. Big Easy says when your offensive line is weak, you need an aggressive back that hits the hole fast and doesn't dance around the backfield. I agree with that. I think there have been times this year where there's been opportunities and guys have just not gotten where they need to be, whether it was vision or just not playing with that intensity you talked about. That has been an issue this year. Richard Berry says he thinks they'll win against Arizona 42-28. And there's some, I'm sorry if I didn't get to your comment here. Okay, one more I do want to touch on. Brian Caper said, where is Dalen Wright and will he still be here next year? I don't know if Dalen's still dealing with an injury. He's played in one play this year that I know of. He played against Utah. They put him in down the red zone, threw a fade pattern to him. It didn't work. As far as his status next year, I mean, it might be possible. I personally wouldn't really mess with it. I mean, I just think at a certain point you got to say, okay, this experiment didn't work. And I know Dalen's got a ton of potential and they love what he can do. I believe at the start of fall camp, he was a starter on the depth chart, but it's never panned out in the 2 years the way that we hoped. He did make impact plays in 2023 when he was on the field. He hadn't been on the field this year. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe it is as simple as they've just got guys in front of them they really like, and that rotation's been working, so why mess with it? But, yeah, I think it'd be time to move on. But that's just my opinion. I don't know what the coaching staff thinks, or if he's been dealing with an injury all year, which in that case, I mean, there's really not much you can do. This is Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Enjoy the game Saturday. We'll have the post-game show after.